Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, BioShock 2 on Xbox 360. The original BioShock debuted to universal praise and astronomical sales numbers, so a sequel was guaranteed. But how could anything follow such a start to a franchise? Some say the sequel failed to live up to what came before, but others disagree. Let's dive back into the undersea world of Rapture with today's topic, 2010's BioShock 2. As I stated in my BioShock review, the seabed city of Rapture was based on one man's vision, that of Andrew Ryan, industrialist and uber-capitalist, intent on having a place where the sweat of one's brow, as he put it, was all the impetus one needed behind reaping unlimited rewards for one's successful work. No gods, no governments, no one in need. Ryan was based on real-life writer Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism, which was based on ultimate selfishness for the betterment of the society as a whole. By the end of BioShock, Ryan is dead, his greatest work having beat him to death, and the city is in ruins after legions of his former citizens, now genetically modified mutants, have ransacked the Great Society. During that adventure, the player will repeatedly encounter an enemy type called the Big Daddy, a modified diving suit with a drill arm that accompanies a young girl called the Little Sister, a child mutated by the drug of choice of Rapture, the chemical called Atom, as she collects it from the dead. Whether you rescued or devoured the Little Sisters in that game, you needed to destroy their mindless protectors first. BioShock 2 takes us back in time a little, before Rapture's fall, and places us in the iron-shod boots of our protagonist, Subject Delta. Delta was once a citizen of Rapture who was placed into the original Big Daddy program and experimented on by Rapture scientists to become one of the prototype Big Daddies. Delta is the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet, if you weren't aware, so he truly is one of the first ones, and is psychically bonded to a little sister named Eleanor, once the daughter of a known Rapture dissident named Sophia Lamb, and who was taken by Ryan to be placed into his mutant dolly botherer program. Lamb, taking this rather personally, finds Eleanor and separates her from Delta and commands the walking tank to kill himself before being flushed out of an airlock onto the ocean floor. However, Delta reactivates, more than awakens, sometime later and re-enters Rapture only to find the place devastated. When Delta was keel-hauled, it was 1958. The events of the first BioShock occurred during that time, and it is now 1968 when Delta comes back online to a collapsed nut house full of aging mutants and insane machines. Sophia Lamb somehow survived all this, and now runs Rapture in Ryan's place. Only she runs it as the quote-unquote Rapture family. Lamb does not follow Ryan's old beliefs and is not a fan of objectivism. Instead, she follows collectivism, seeing it all of Rapture's people as a group identity, not as individuals with their own goals, and that everyone must work their lives in favor of the group goal. Oh boy, Rapture just cannot get away from extremist ideals running their society. While the developers of the previous game hung their hats on Rand and other objectivist philosophers, in this game, the inspiration comes directly from Karl Marx and John Stuart Mill, whose works such as Das Kapital propose the idea that the health and wealth of a society is much more important than that of the individual. Across two games now, there is a literal war between the concepts of selfishness versus altruism. As I've said before, politics, motherfuckers. Your games be loaded with them. But how is Subject Delta tied up in all this? Well, he's something of an accident to this. He's the fly in the ointment, the monkey in the wrench. Bonus points if you get that reference. Delta's mental bond with his little sister is still active, and it is she who calls out to him, a girl now physically grown into a woman, but still locked in her little sister status. Delta is the ultimate individual, hell-bent on saving Eleanor, heedless of any of Lamb's, or Ryan's, philosophies, or political imaginations. Lamb both hates and uses Delta for this, letting him crush her enemies while setting the more dangerous remnants of Rapture upon him, including a new creation, the utterly mad and mighty Big Sisters, who function like more agile Big Daddies. Like the protagonist of the previous game, Delta charges himself with his own batches of Atom, and swaps out his drill arm for rivet guns, machine guns, missile launchers, and whatever other methods of destruction he can equip himself with for this mission, flinging fire and lightning or bullets and bombs with equal measure. Much like how Jack Ryan of the first game shared a lot of run-and-gun skills with Leon S. Kennedy from Resident Evil 4, Subject Delta shares his construction tools as weapons methodology with Isaac Clarke of Dead Space, which had come out during the time BioShock 2 was in development. Along the way, Delta, taunted from a distance through the radio by Lamb, and helped by Rapture survivors still loyal to Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, who now curates the Little Sisters rehabilitated in the wake of the first game, Delta learns that Lamb intends to sacrifice all of Rapture so that their minds and memories can be placed into Eleanor to make her the ultimate selfless leader, and truly create a great society in capital letters. Eleanor, as you can guess, is not fond of this idea. Delta storms the remains of Rapture, not destroyed by the protagonist of the first game, and levels these areas, finally entering the dark heart of Lamb's fortress to find Eleanor secreted away in a research lab tank. Before Delta can free her, Lamb stops Eleanor's heart, and thus severs the bond between her and Delta. The problem here is that when a psychic bond between a little sister and a big daddy is cut, the big daddy dies. The little sister can survive, but the daddies never do. The allusion to fathers being disposable is pretty thick on this one, as the little sister can always get a new big daddy, as it was designed. That, unfortunately, is what happens to Delta. Although Eleanor is revived and freed, she can no longer feel the bond, and Delta is dying. But he is still driven to fight to protect Eleanor as they escape Rapture together. After giving everything he had, body and soul, to both Rapture and Eleanor, he has nothing left. Eleanor even willingly transforms herself into a big sister to save her protector, but it is ultimately all for naught. Delta is fatally wounded as they escape, and from here, one of several endings play out, depending on Delta's and the player's actions during the course of the game. Eleanor saves her mother Sophia Lamb or lets her drown, or either absorbs Delta's memories and personality to help the little sisters make a better life on the surface, or she does it and becomes a dictator bent on world domination. BioShock 2 is a divisive departure from the first BioShock, taking the exact opposite track to the first game's questions of is society, run by selfishness, doomed to fail as the social underpinnings are pulled away in favor of man as mythic hero, the ultimate selfishness. BioShock 2 asks, can a society where everyone is made to work together for the good of the state able to survive as all must be sacrificed for the greater good? As I said earlier, two sorts of extremist beliefs. It is interesting to me that the developers chose these models, and it is not by accident that both games take place during the height of the Cold War, where in the United States and our individual-driven capitalist society was pitted against the Soviet Union's collective-driven communists, with nuclear weapons and the fate of the whole world in the balance. Games like Fallout and Wasteland have explored the what-if scenario with that conflict a bit more in depth, and many other games have explored the convex side of the 1970s and 1980s world conflicts where the Cold War and its politics overshadowed everything, most famously the Call of Duty series. Problematically, humans don't work in extreme environments. Hell, on our own planet we can only successfully live where the elements are carefully balanced. Otherwise we have to terraform the environment to survive. Societies do not survive long in extremes of thought as well, as humans may be swayed by philosophies and ideas if it brings them comfort and benefits, but we are ultimately tribal creatures in tribal societies, involved on an unforgiving planet and deadly universe where we do not wish to interact with those not immediately and viscerally like us. While humans may become more powerful as ideas than as flesh and blood, those ideas can and do become lost over time, can be perverted and changed into something that does not even resemble the original idea, and we, predictably, revert to type. And as we have seen in the real world, those societies of extremism do collapse, either from external or internal conflict. Even communism was subverted from the onset by having ultra-wealthy oligarchs running it from the shadows. At least we Americans had the guts to put our ultra-wealthy ruling class on full display for everyone to see, and called it a benefit. BioShock 2 deals with a number of themes that one does not often find in video games. Egalitarianism, moral absolutism, cults of personality, and just what does family and parenthood mean, especially to those who have unusual family dynamics or come from non-traditional families, whether they are still valid or not. This is what the developers of 2K Games, who developed the first BioShock as well, were going for, a counterpoint to the first game. But since this is still a video game, an owned subsidiary of Take-Two Interactive, Big Papa Dollar had to add video gamey elements in the early 2010s. The Money Men also had the developers fix the less well-received components of the first game, such as changing the method of how the hacking minigame worked, and the team was to shoehorn in a multiplayer deathmatch game between the Rapture citizens fighting it out amongst themselves for fame and glory and that sweet, sweet addictive atom, which by its inclusion really undermines the serious nature of the storytelling being explored the same in the main game. Why? Because we were at the dawn of everything in games heading towards the all-the-time multiplayer and always online demands to keep consistent monetization until the product can be disposed of with something newer and shinier. Really, as I've said many times, the corporate capitalists funding these games did not know the piss was being taken out of them in the very products they profited from. Well, more likely they don't care because they don't have to. The one who dies with the most toys wins, after all. Did all of this help or hinder BioShock? Critics liked it upon its debut, but not that much, often saying it really did nothing to distinguish itself from its predecessor. I guess an exploration of changing philosophies in an underwater technocratic fantasy land doesn't really qualify for game critics, but that was the biggest hit it took, being too much like the original. Sales were about 1 million less than the previous game's sales, and this upset the suits at Take-Two, as they expected it to outdo its predecessor by at least 1 million unit sales more. The multiplayer was considered lackluster, and the DLC was just sort of okay. All this wound up sinking the goodwill for BioShock 2 at the time. But in the intervening years, it has become seen as a more favorable light, Kotaku even saying it was the forerunner of the walking simulator genre of games. Kotaku, you fucking high? Did you actually play the game? Or did you play it for an hour, again, just to hit deadline, then go back to drowning your sorrows of being a games journalist instead of being a Hollywood scriptwriter or successful novelist? I thought BioShock 2 was the equal of its predecessor game. More of the same, and at times even tougher, with a new weapons moveset and no longer being as nimble as the previous character, instead clunking along like you were a person in an actual heavy diving suit. Hell, the first-person screen even has it set up to have the edges cut off, as if you were looking out the view portal of a helmet. Rapture is huge, and of course it is still full of mutants, with places to explore that are not retreads of the original. I especially like the fights with the Big Sisters, who I felt were a worthy addition to the story canon, and were quite challenging, but in a good way. Just come loaded for bear. These ladies can take a lot of punishment. However, a decade on, I'm not sure how everyone is still surviving under the sea as the whole thing collapses and there was a regime change, but that's not really the point. I think it was unfairly judged during its debut period. And of course, there are going to be new features added to make money, changing game business models and all. I don't like them either, but they are successful elsewhere, and it is the world we live in. BioShock 2 can be a tough one to parse mentally, like the first game. If you agree with the ideas of the obvious bad guys, then you may walk away mad as your beloved ideals are being insulted. If you are just here for shoot-'em-up fun, then it is slow, again, fine for me, but I'm not everyone, and you may miss or simply not care what the story is trying to talk about. But it isn't a bad game. It is beautiful in its destruction, and sad, and chaotic, and hopeful at once. We just have more of the city of Rapture to see. And if you aren't sure or don't believe me, dive into Delta's boots and decide for yourself. I mean, it's not like we all have to think the same way, comrade. Thank you for listening.